don't know how warm or cold we all are, but Lee, do you want to just shut the door, not for secrecy, but just to stop our noise going down the corridor? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So we are quorate, so we'll turn to the agenda. We have got questions from members of the public representing Benson Road Residents Association, Lillian Rundblad, Jane Ward, Nala Byrne, Janet Lockwood, Jan Naylor, Councillor Oscar Gillespie and Keith Warburton, and also Councillor Mike Todd Jones, Chairman of the LLF, wants to speak. So what I'm going to do is take you at the relevant point of the agenda, which means item 7, Histon Road, is Benson Road, and I'll do you in this order: Benson Roads Residents Association, Lillian Rundblad, and Mike Todd Jones. Number 8, we've got 4 people: Jane Ward, Nala Byrne, Janet Lockwood, Jan Nana. Item 9, Councillor Oscar Gillespie. Item 10, Keith Warburton. I'm sorry to ask everybody to wait until their relevant place. Apologies for absence.
Everybody's here, Chairman.
And then we do have an apology, I think, from Councillor Kevin Price. So when we come to his area, we will take his report, which he's written for us, and we'll just go through it ourselves. We then come to the membership of the Joint Assembly. Mark Robertson is stepping down from the Joint Assembly. If you remember, he is academic representative. There are 3 academic representatives. He's on behalf of Cambridge Regional College. Thank you very much indeed, Mark, for his time there. Now, the way this works is that the university nominates somebody to fill his place, and Professor Alan Dinger, I think you've got a nomination.
Yes, thank you. We'd like to nominate Jo Sainsbury. She works for IMET, which stands for Innovation, Manufacturing, Engineering and Technology, which is also associated with Cambridge Regional College.
And what then happens is we as a board consider that, and if we like it, ratify it. I would be very happy to ratify it. Yes. Would you be happy to ratify that? So that's it. That is Jo Sainsbury. I think we're still one down on the Assembly, and Claire's working on that. Declarations of interest. We've all filled in our forms. Phil, I know you always remind us that you live near Gilbert Road.
I live on Gilbert Road, between Histon Road and Milton Road.
Which is going to come up. Ian, I think you want to remind us that the County Council owns some land of...
Indeed, that's item 8, and the County Council has ownership on a possible additional park and ride site. And therefore declare that as an interest, which is not recorded at the moment.
And I don't think there are any others. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting start on our agenda pack, page 1, and go until page 18. Does anyone have any comments on those? Are you happy for me to sign them? Yeah. So we now go to agenda page 19, which is the report from the Joint Assembly, which Councillor Price has had a migraine, so he apologises as a last-minute item of not being able to attend. Should we just take ourselves through it? And are there any points that we ourselves want to talk about on number 2, Histon Road?
Well, I just think if we reference the issues at each item.
Yeah. Number 3, Western Orbital. I was struck in passing. I was going to ask Councillor Price this on 3.2 on Western Orbital. An interesting sentence. The GCP needs to ensure that the capacity of park and rides provides the volume required in the thousands and not just the hundreds. Which I thought was an interesting remark. Debate about the Junction 11 park and ride also brought the Foxton level crossing into the discussion. And I think that will come back when we do that item. Number 4, city access. I think the germane point there is the first sentence. The Joint Assembly were pleased to receive a paper on city access. There were some comments about the long time it had taken to reach the point, but it was acknowledged it was good to have this debate, and there was more praise yet again for the big conversation that Beth led. Demand management is referenced in 4.3. Ian, any other points?
Sorry, the point I attended the Assembly, Mr Chairman, the bit I wanted to pick up at 4 was the suggestion which came from a councillor in Kent, which I thought was a very sensible, I look particularly at Peter at this point. Councillor Grenville, okay, he actually produced some, I thought, some interesting data and information, which I think leads to, the board needs to understand a bit more. So what I would perhaps ask, actually, if we could ask Peter to have a look at that and perhaps give us some briefing about what that was said at that time, because I thought that was of some interest for all of us.
Yeah, and the council subsequently has provided some information on that, which we'll be feeding into.
It's not a discussion, but I think it is useful to recognise it and have a little bit of analytic work done on it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. Quarterly progress report. There's a reference to the motion map, but I hope everybody saw downstairs the lobby screens, and those are working fantastic. I think that's really, really good, the lobby screen, and with Ian Lewis downstairs, and it's the data and the technology behind the lobby screen, which is effectively now done and complete, which will feed into the motion map. So that's good progress.
One very minor point on that, worth recording, that when we all say that maybe Google Maps is already doing this, we are actually feeding data into Google rather than the other way around for that. So
that's right, isn't it? Well, it says Google on the bottom left-hand corner. It's our data that is going into Google. That's worth referencing. So are there any other comments in the absence of Councillor Price that we want to make on his report, or should we take it as read? Okay. So if we now move on to agenda item 7 on page 23, which is the History Road bus cycling walking improvements final concept. We have some speakers on this, which we'll do first, and we'll do Peter, your report, and then we'll have the board's questions for clarification and discussion. So, the Benson Road Residents Association. Would you like? Thank you very much indeed, madam. Ooh. Would you like me to do the LLF chair first?
it's up to you.
Would the LLF chair, who wants to go first?
Don't know.
I'm happy to speak with the questions go first. because
Yeah,
I can
go first.
tie that up into what I'm saying.
Yeah. Carry on, madam.
Okay, sorry.
Our two questions relate to the answers to the questions from the Joint Assembly in February, which we wanted to clarify because we were unsure about some of the detailing. So the first one is about mitigation. So Benson Area Residents Association raised a question at the GCP Joint Assembly regarding consultation on traffic calming measures to alleviate the increased pressures on Canterbury, Benson Street, Priory Streets and Oxford Windsor Roads due to the expected increase in rat running through our streets as part of the GCP mitigation process. The answer to the Benra question was the mitigation ideas put forward regarding rat running are out of the scope of this scheme and need to be further assessed by GCP. However, in the original major objectives of the City Deal, mitigation was listed, Objective 6, as an objective, and an assessment of the impacts on the existing residents was considered important. Benra would like assurance that ideas regarding rat running are not out of the scope of this scheme, and that mitigation measures regarding rat running will be carried out by GCP. So, could the Executive Board clarify to Benra what its role will be regarding mitigation? Shall I do the second question?
Yeah, I think let's answer that one.
Yeah.
If you'd like. Ian, your corporate on transport, do you want to address this? Would you like Peter to
Peter, I
help?
think will be fair.
So in terms of the report outlines the objectives of the scheme in 4 point. getting the Histon Road scheme in 4.1. And addressing rapidly on other routes is not part of the objectives of the scheme. So in terms of progressing Histon Road, other than we're currently looking at giving priority to pedestrians at the junctions, which will mitigate the attractiveness of driving on other routes, we are not proposing to take part in mitigation schemes as part of this. There's a however. Yeah. So however, the County Council are doing some work on mitigation measures in the area, and we will, as part of that work, contribute to the County Council's work to deal with that as a separate matter to the Histon Road scheme.
Am I allowed to comment on?
Well, not really, I'm afraid, and we have in the past been quite ruthless with that rule. But I think the summing up is that the wider point is something will be done on rat running. It'll be done in a different, what you might call, scheme. It'll be done and it'll be done joined up.
As the County Council representative, I'm quite happy to meet residents along with Peter and other officers to discuss that with you at some point in the future.
Good, thank you.
Along possibly with the chairman of the LLA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
And you're going to ask the second question
That is the
as
second
well,
question.
yeah.
Okay. Ben also asked whether GCP Joint Assembly could reassure residents that air quality and vibrations will not worsen as a result of the changes on Histon Road, with specific relation to the removal of parking. What specific measures are proposed to reduce noise and vibration? The answer to this was, it is not considered that air quality and vibration will worsen following implementation of the scheme. Rather, improving facilities for walking, cycling and public transport should contribute to improving air quality. At the LF meeting on the 5th of March, a diagram of cross-section measurements at the south end of Histon Road showed 2 times 1.8 metre pedestrian access, 1.5 cycleways and 5.8 metres carriageway, i.e. 12.4 metres total. The representative from Stagecoach advised that this was not enough space for 2 buses to pass each other safely, indicating that buses, and in my brackets, and heavy goods vehicles, would have to use cycleways in order to pass each other. This indicates that heavy traffic will be passing much closer to the west side of Histon Road than at present. It is likely also that the removal of parking will result in vehicles driving faster down the road. For that reason, it is vital that Burnley residents receive reassurance from the Executive Board. Can the GCP reassure residents that air quality and vibrations will not worsen as a result of changes on Histon Road? And what specific measures are proposed to reduce speed, noise and vibration?
I'm going to start with Peter and then I'll come in after.
Thanks, Ian. So a starting point, what we're looking at here is a preliminary concept that will hopefully, subject to the board's decision, go out for consultation, and so we look forward to hearing views on that. The position is unchanged from the response we gave at the Joint Assembly. What we are doing is managing the highway space in that location. And that actually we are trying to ensure that there is a suitable space for all vehicles, but not space whereby you can have any type of large vehicle hurtle down at speed, which would link particularly to any vibration. Encouraging people to walk, cycle and use public transport is designed to offer an alternative to the private vehicles, so there are less vehicles going down there, which will offer an overall quality benefit. So our position is unchanged. Nevertheless, in terms of the basis of the consultation is to go out and listen to people's views on what they think of our proposals.
Sorry, the piece I wish to add is about air pollution. Air pollution is often caused by standing cars and lorries and buses. So if those move faster through, then the air quality, and there is research through public health that will demonstrate that, is improved. So there is a very strong link between what I call standing traffic of all types and air pollution. There is a very strong link between the two. And I would hope that as a result of that, the air quality will improve.
Great, thank you.
That's it.
Thank
you.
That have been answered correctly.
Lillian Rundblad.
I have two questions. In one, I am the chair of the Historical Residents Association. Yeah. And the second one, I am the vice chair of the Historical Residents Board, so there are different me's here. The environmental impact on Historic Road, this is what I'm going to start with. And the danger to us residents of from nitrous oxides in particular as well now. Reducing population exposure and reducing local traffic emissions as quickly as possible is urgent. The Cambridge Air Quality Action Plan is welcomed by the residents along Histon Road and nearby areas, and in particular that it is a joint commitment between Cambridge City Council, Health England, Greater Cambridge Partnership and Cambridgeshire County Council. Having identified the range of actions required and also willing to take responsibility for ensuring they are progressed. Histon Road, Huntington Road and Victoria Road, Ring Road is the border of the clean air zone. So also we are grateful for the preliminary design of Histon Road showing attention to the rows of trees from Gilbert to Carisbrook Road, a valuable protection from air pollutants. There are further restrictions to traffic movements to be considered. Huntington Road has 20-mile-per-hour speed limit starting at the crossing with Histon Road, same for Victoria Road. So we request that the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit be enforced on Histon Road from Victoria Road to Windsor Road and Ackerman Street. The GCP Joint Assembly, they were concerned about the enforcement and restrictions for HGV delivery trucks to the local stores. Victoria Road and Gilbert Road have restrictions on HGV traffic nighttime. And we would then request that HGV nighttime restrictions on Histon Road be enforced between Victoria Road and King Setchers Road. So Histon Road Area Residents Association requests that the GCP Executive Board to direct the GCP Project Manager for Histon Road project to include above A and B in the analysis for improved air quality and noise reduction and report to the Executive Board on each proposal.
So in terms of, so again, caveat where proposals to go out to consultation. I mean, the Joint Assembly discussed the parking and loading issues at length when they considered this. We responded by saying that clearly needs to be picked up as part of the formal traffic regulation audit process, that it is a balance between allowing residents and businesses to park and access the site, but actually then impacting on the movement of particularly public transport and other vehicles on the highway, which is why we needed to take the time through the process. We can look at a 20-mile-an-hour zone, the caveat being that 20 miles an hour, the environment needs to be self-enforcing. Because we will not get police officers stood there with speed guns. The environment needs to reflect that. And if it doesn't reflect that, then the traffic will move at an appropriate movement pace, which is the 30 miles an hour in a traditional residential area. So work to do. I think we recognise that in the report, particularly the challenge between parking and loading, and the traffic regulation order process will pick this up formally.
Can I just add about the HGVs, okay? Because I've had quite a bit of experience in the past about HGVs, and that is very different to a 20-mile limit or a 30-mile limit. The restrictions in respect to the 30-mile limits are fine and well understood through regulations, but the different regulations, traffic regulations in respect of the HGVs and what we do with HGVs, and that very much goes to the businesses which would be supplied by those vehicles. So it's a very different process that you go through. It is extremely complex from experience, extremely long and tedious as well, and you need to separate the two. I'm happy to look at it from the County Council's perspective, but I must give you what I call the health warning, that it is not a simple fix, because the businesses will say, we want the vehicles, they must deliver, and therefore they do have what I call that type of right to actually put their point of view. And it is quite long and tedious to actually do that, and it's quite a complex process, I'm afraid to say.
Well, just
Peter,
short, night restrictions we were talking
Any
about.
restriction, I've been through night restriction in my own village that I live, and that went to a public inquiry with the inspector, with barristers, times 4.
So Peter, in terms of what is in scope, to use that phrase on our history rate study, looking at this 20-mile-an-hour limit is in scope, and you're going to do that?
We can consider that, Chair,
Yeah.
but it is, 20 miles an hour is reflective of the environment
True,
that
but
vehicles can move
But
out,
it's in scope for us to consider
to
it.
consider it.
So that we will think about. HGV night time, is that in scope, or is that a council matter?
Well, it will be part of the formal traffic regulation order process.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the key difference between Histon Road and some of the other surrounding roads is Histon Road's a main arterial road into the
But
city.
we will at least think about it.
That can be considered as part
So
of that
both of
process.
those are, to use double negative, not ruled out, not ruled
Very
out.
good. Thank you.
They will be part of the future thinking.
Yes. Please, thank you.
And I've got your other question, your second
Yeah,
question.
now I'm the vice chair of the LLF. And this question came up at the LLF on the 5th of March and was voted on, and the vote was carried. So, at its most recent meeting on 5th of March, Histon Road Local Liaison Forum agreed that the Greater Cambridge Partnership Board should be requested to request and directed GCP project manager for Histon Road project to analyze the full matters set out in A and B below, with a report to the GCP board on each proposal after his analysis is completed. So A, the proposal from HRRA to move the bus lane further north to end at Hazelwood Close, where sufficient space is available for a combined toucan crossing and bus gate, giving better bus priority than the current proposal. And B, coordinating with the developer of Darwin Green to formulate a combined solution between the developer and the GCP, incorporating a toucan crossing at the junction of Histon Road and Darwin Green Squash Court Road and Carisbrook Road to ensure improved safety for pedestrians and cyclists.
We should start again. So we, as you know, the answer I gave at the Joint Assembly, we've looked at previously moving the bus lane further north, but we've got problems there in terms of drainage and levels issues, which rules that out. And so if we wish to deliver public transport improvements, then it's in the location that it is at the moment. In terms of working with the developer and looking at the additional crossing, so sympathetic to that, the issue we've got is the location to the existing crossing, that we need to try and find that balance, or else we can't put it in, because we're simply then just slowing all of the vehicles and all the movements down the line.
Yeah, just add a very short one on the existing crossing is a non-signal,
Okay.
and it is ruled out already by the GCP or CTD at the time.
Ian?
I think the only thing to add actually is, of course, Cambridge County Council, when that the developer would have discussed those as part of the development. Okay, so there is what I call an add-on a little bit to there has been discussions a long time ago when Darwin Green, of course, was being developed with the developer, with the Highways Department, which is Cambridge County Council. So I think I'm aware of the question, as you might say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the answer will be quite as simple.
And so, to summarise, Peter, in terms of the first one, which is moving the bus lane further north, the answer is, I'm afraid, unsympathetic to that, and that the public consultation will not have it moved, but we welcome comments in the public consultation. For the second one, about the toucan, sympathetic to that one, and you're having
And if
conversations.
we can find a signals way of dealing with it, then that's something we will work with the council to try and solve.
Yeah, so that is important.
So I'm not being flippant, but I think 3 of your points we're sympathetic to, or will at least attempt to meet. No promises. The 4th, I'm afraid, not. Thank you for your questions. Nalo Byrne. No, I'm terribly sorry. I'm terribly sorry. I'm going right ahead of myself. No, Mr. O'Byrne, I'm very sorry. I'm completely ahead of myself. We want Councillor Mike Todd Jones, Chairman of the LLF. I'm sorry.
We'll come back to
I'm sorry.
Western Orbital on the next slide.
So, Mike, whereas questions are submitted in advance,
No, thank you, Chair.
we don't know what you're going to say.
No, I'm really here just to, I'm not going to, you'd be glad to know I'm not going to give you a freeze of effective in annual report that I gave last time in November. I'm recovering a bit from the flu, so you have to bear with me. They nearly had to carry me out of the local liaison forum on the 5th of March, and Lillian actually kindly took over and chaired that meeting. But I have got, what I'm going to try just to summarise what I think are the key outcomes, or the key points made from the local liaison forum, some of which you may want to take on board and bear in mind in terms of the forthcoming public consultation. But essentially, I'll just run through the sort of key elements, if that's okay, and then touch on a couple of other things. Regarding the main junctions, the five-way junction at Histon Road, Victoria Road, Huntingdon Road, Castle Hill and Mount Pleasant. We recognise it's a really tricky junction in many respects to deal with, and I think there are still some issues, and there might be comments that come out of the public consultation regarding the really great attempts to improve, in particular, safety regarding cycling movements. We still very much appreciate that full access is maintained to Victoria Road at this junction. There may well be some comments from the public consultation that further inform the views about this particular junction. Gilbert Road and Warwick Road junction, I think we've come up with a very good solution, which I think has been further endorsed by the local liaison forum regarding the in particular cycling and pedestrian movements at that junction. Darwin Green, I'll come back a little bit to that when I talk about the bus lane. That's the aspect of the access to Darwin Green from what will be from the former Swiss Laundry site, where there are also 27 homes to be developed there, and in the close vicinity to that is the Carisbrooke Road junction. We recognise there are a few issues there. I'll come back to that briefly. And we also, I think, further endorse the Darwin Green Spine Road, King's Headridge Road junction, and taking the scheme up to the A14 junction. On the bus lane issue, I know that the local liaison forum has some difference of opinion about that point location of the bus lane. This is the inbound bus lane, essentially from a point just north of Blackwall Road on the one side to just south of Carisbrooke Road. And I accept, of course, that bus lane, improving bus trips is a key part of what the Greater Cambridge Partnership are trying to do in respect to this arterial route. My own view is that the key concerns early in the process was potentially the compulsory land purchase. That is no longer going to happen, and I'm very pleased that commitment has been maintained. And also a commitment, I think, for the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the landscape architect who's been engaged to work with residents in terms of any verge loss will perhaps be mitigated with supporting greening front gardens and aspects like that, which will, I think, mitigate perhaps the effect of having that bus lane there. But as I say, it's going to be a compromise, I think, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the public consultation. But as chair, my view is that it is a very critical part of the elements that the Greater Cambridge Partnership is trying to deliver. So I'm trying to be slightly neutral in terms of, I know there are contrary views from the local liaison forum. We still obviously really welcome the retention of the line of trees on the sort of southern part of the northern section of Histon Road on the western side, and where possible, if trees are removed, that they will be replaced. That green environmental aspect of Histon Road is really critical to maintain, so I'm really glad that's going to remain committed to. And then I should touch on perhaps the other difficult element, perhaps for some residents, which is the removal on street parking. And again, we'll see what comes out of the public consultation, but I know a lot of work has gone into analysing the existing resident parking zone in Benson Street area, and the capacity has been identified to absorb the resident parking spaces that will be lost on Histon Road, and that a lot of work has gone into identifying alternative locations for pay and display bays. I do think that in terms of the local businesses, my personal view again, others have expressed it, others I'm not sure quite so strongly feel about it on the local liaison forum, is that the parking options by Cranwell Court, opposite Midan, and other local businesses should, in my view, be maintained. They will lose some very short-term parking bays directly outside Midan, and I think the compromise there would be to retain the parking bays outside Cranwell Court. That has implications for the floating bus stop that's proposed there, but there would still be the option for the bus stop outside the Graves pub and other floating bus stops along the route. So again, I'd like that to be considered by the partnership, and obviously there might be comment from the public consultation about that. Just to find a couple other points, I do appreciate that in terms of traffic mitigation, so-called rat running mitigation, that there is a commitment from highways and the project team to work with residents and myself and Lillian Runblad as Vice Chair of the Histon Road Local Liaison Forum to look at measures that may be required, not just regarding Canterbury Street, Benson Street and that area, but other areas that were identified in, I think, our resolution 5, which also referred to April Street, Stretton Avenue and to Roseford Road. So I'm more than happy to work with County Council Highways on those aspects. And I think that's pretty well it in terms of, yeah, I was just going to come back to that. There might be a bit of analysis done and maybe some alternatives in the public consultation put forward about that whole area relating to the Carisbrooke Road junction. Whether the inbound bus lane could stop a little short of the Carisbrooke Road junction, and that access, pedestrian and cycle access to Darwin Green, could possibly be put forward as a, I don't know, possibly as an alternative, an option in the consultation. That it may be something that, if it helps to give a better solution, including to the signalised crossings that are being suggested in that area, and how you rationalise or incorporate those crossings in that whole junction. Maybe that needs to be thought about a bit more, and perhaps some different options put forward in the public consultation. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Councillor Todd James. Does anyone want to? We'll reserve our general discussion for later, but any particular ones?
No particular points. Jimmy said to say I was in attendance in the local liaison forum. I think that's a true reflection of what was discussed with the officers. Both officers are present at this meeting and obviously hearing what we're saying. We've got the maps with us, which were done on the day. I think it's just saying that it is a fair reflection of what took place at that meeting. I can confirm that.
Thank you. Lewis, it's your city, as it were. Do you want to?
No, I'm just obviously keen to follow up the detail with Councillor Todd Jones and the others from the local liaison forum, because this is now down to obviously a proposal before us, but the detail matters, so we'll need to follow up the detail.
Phil, recognising your location where you live, are there any questions you've got for?
No questions.
Claire, anything from the business side?
No, I mean, this looks affordable, it looks value for money. My question is whether it actually makes very much difference.
We'll come on to that in a general discussion. Yeah. Great, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. But I think generally, I mean, I wrote down you appreciate great efforts, very good solution, you endorse, really glad on trees, appreciative, so quite supportive, two particular areas, Darwin Green area and Cranwell Court. Peter, do you want to talk about the paper?
Chair, I'm not sure, given the... I'm not sure I've got a great deal more to add, actually. I mean, in terms of the scheme itself, I think the Chairman has outlined, we are balancing a whole series of priorities along this corridor. It is an optimal solution, balancing sort of walking, cycling, public transport and general traffic. It certainly isn't a perfect solution for any of these things. There has been extensive engagement, and I recognise there's still some parts of the community who want something different, but we are trying to pull together a single scheme. We've highlighted particularly the on-street parking as an issue, because we're not trying to hide this under a bushel. We want to be very clear in terms of the consultation to say, to generate that additional capacity on that route, something has to give. And where we're at is the on-street parking. We have and will continue to look at mitigation measures in terms of the other roads in the area, whether we can find particular accommodate the 42 spaces that are being taken away. But really, Chairman, out to consultation. We need to produce this into the maps are not terribly user friendly, so we need to produce it into consultation material that brings it to life, particularly around the landscaping in the urban realm bit, which if we're not careful, we just focus on what the bus lane looks like rather than what the actual corridor will look like going forward, with a view to coming forward with a final set of proposals, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification for Peter? Should we then open up the board's discussion? Should we, Phil, given it's your area, do you want to start? Your patch.
I think just 2 or 3 very quick points. Before I became a member of the board, I was aware of the original proposals for this, and I must say, where we are now and where we were then is a huge difference, and I think that's to be very much welcomed. The direction of travel, the consultation, the engagement, the amount of work that's gone on with the community and officers, I think has made for a much better scheme. The one thing that I keep mentioning every time that we talk about this scheme and the Milton Road scheme is the importance of the schools in that area and the importance of improving cycling and pedestrian safety in a location where there are a number of schools, Mayfield schools, very close by, but it's a major transport route to get to a number of schools, particularly around Gilbert Road as well. So I'm particularly pleased because of that element of the scheme. I think that's all I'd say, just give my general support.
Great, thank you. Claire?
General comments, if we can have schemes like this which encourage mode shift onto cycles, walking, that's good. There will still be people who need to come down Eastern Road in the car. It won't make a very big difference to them. Buses will be slightly easier. I'm fully supportive of doing something. But I do fear in the future we might need to do something more radical in one-way systems and all those other radical things. But for now, this is a good scheme.
Thank you. Yeah.
Really concur with the literature consultation. I think there are obviously some details that need to be worked through, as we know, particularly related to businesses, okay, because there are businesses down there, so I think we do need to work that through. I think there will have to be a considerable amount of what I call give and take, because you've got pedestrians and cyclists, you've got bus lanes, etc. So trying to get all of those to all agree, I think may be the challenge, but I would hope that we would come out with a scheme that most people would support in the longer term. So I'm supportive of what I've seen, I'm supportive of what the have done and the work that the officers have done to make it considerably better. The schools was picked up actually in the consultation, okay, and that's an important thing. So I think when it comes to the consultation, we need to make sure that all the schools in that area are aware that it is happening, because there is a lot of schools in that area. So I think when it comes to consultation, making sure they're fully aware and the governors are fully aware. But other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'm content with what I've seen before me and what I've seen at the LFF, etc.
Thank you. Yes.
Just to reiterate some of those points without repetition, it is a different scheme, better scheme. It needs to think about the junctions. It needs to have a look at the detail on the different aspects. There's a particular need through Histon Road for through cycling. There's a significant number of people now using it, including, not surprisingly, to go up to Histon, and local people as well. So I'm glad to see the scheme reconfigured. It was always going to be constrained by the very narrow nature of the bottom end of Histon Road. So it makes a lot of sense. There's clearly a number of issues, details about parking, about some of the adjacent streets, and there's still further growth with the completion of the housing on Darwin area. So yeah, I'll just work with the local liaison forum and others on some of that detail. So subject to the decision we're about to make, there's still some work to be done, clearly, to get that detail right.
Peter, I think really just a couple of things I'd say. Firstly, I think we probably all want to pay tribute to Paul van der Balk, who's sitting at the back of the room, for an enormous amount of work, Paul, that you've done on this. Peter, I don't know if you want to echo that. And
Absolutely.
Chris Tunstall would probably say the same. That I mean, I think you've heard, Paul, that we all say it's a different scheme. I mean, this started off with the possibility of taking people's gardens, didn't it, and things like that. And I think possibly we're all learning on all sides that actually working together is in our strapline. We really mean it. This has been transformed, and possibly, you know, we wrongly and unnecessarily upset some residents at the beginning, but particularly thanks to Paul and I think the hard work of the LLF and everybody, it just feels a completely good scheme. It's not necessarily 100% there, but it's definitely getting closer into that. Peter, if we take this decision and go to public consultation, is this the last public consultation that there would be along the way? Can you just help us with process management? Is this what you might call the big and the main one?
Yeah, this is the key one, Chair, in terms of getting the general details. Once we take this decision, we go through the consultation, it will then be a back to board decision to proceed to detailed design. The engagement will continue, as Lewis was saying, in terms of getting those tweaks right, but it's then detailed design that says, let's get this thing measured out, let's get the materials in place, and then let's get going in terms of delivering the scheme.
And detailed design is a long period of time. It's a very detailed design. That takes...
It is everything in detail, so we understand the intricacies of delivering a scheme of this nature.
Yeah.
Detailed design will also consider how we deliver it, because clearly one of the challenges is delivering improvements on the highway without, frankly, mucking up the highway while you're going. So it will consider that, it will consider the procurement arrangements and the delivery arrangements on it. So we will go through this consultation process, we will come back and we will say, this is what we think the final scheme is, let's get on and do it.
And when you come back and say, this is what the final scheme is, let's get on and do it, am I right? There isn't we've gone past public consultation.
Yes,
There's no public consultation.
The engagement will continue.
Yeah, but we've gone past public consultation.
And that doesn't mean to say that we will not continue to tweak and refine, because that's what engagement is for. We're here to listen. But that will be how we proceed with the scheme.
But the reason I'm labelling the point is the members of the public should be no doubt the importance of the next public consultation is very important, because it's essentially the last one.
Okay, can I make a quick point on that? The local liaison forum has suggested, and I think it's a good suggestion before, that at the start of that public consultation in May, that one local liaison forum stakeholder workshop to look at some of the details we talked about would be very helpful. I think only one workshop is required, but look at some of the detail in particular. And that will be as a part of that public consultation, perhaps at the very start of it. And so I will hopefully work with officers to get that stakeholder workshop happening in May at the start of the general public consultation period.
So I think Peter's nodding at that. The exact date is presumably got to be after elections and PERDA. So the exact date will have to be sorted out.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you. So, members of the board, should we take a decision on this? What we usually do is ask Phil and Claire, if you had a vote, which way would you be inclined to vote?
Support.
Thank you. Ian, Lewis, we've decided to vote simultaneously usually, rather than one or the other.
Yeah.
I would vote in favour. Yep. Great, carried. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 8, which starts on page 39 of our agenda pack. We have public questions, which I will take in the following order: Jane Ward, Niall O'Byrne, Janet Lockwood, Jan Naylor.
Jane Ward, Chair of Hawkston Parish Council. How will the various options for the park and ride in our parish, which are being presented to us, impact on the A10 traffic along Cambridge Road in Hawkston? And what provision will be made to permit our residents to exit onto the A10 at Hawkston Gap? I'm most concerned that a short list of options is going out for public consultation without sound modelling of the impact on our residents. Short and sweet.
Ian, do you want to take these one by one or at the end?
Bearing in mind the areas in the ownership of County Arc, it would be better if Peter answers these questions.
Right,
In no
yeah.
hurry.
Do you want to, so one by one, Chair?
Which would you prefer? Yeah, one by one. One by one. Yeah.
Yes, options need to be model tested and information needs to be put in the public domain so that residents, parishes can take and consider it.
We're not going to model it because when we had the...
No, sorry, we don't have to.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So the information will be there.
It will be there. Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No,
That's how it works. Narlow Byrne, Chair of Hawkston Parish Council.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen. I have three questions, please. The first is that the traffic on the A10, which is our high street as well, is forecast to increase by 30% in the period out to 2031. Now, currently, there are 16,000 vehicle movements on an average working day. That's 24 hours. On Hawkston High Street, which, as I've said, is the A10. That 30% increase will bring the total to over 20,000 vehicle movements per day. Please detail the palliative measures the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership will take to address this traffic situation. Could you please include pollution aspects as well? We have a primary school pretty hard by the high street.
Do you want to do all three?
Why don't you do all three? I think that's what we've done before.
Absolutely delighted to do that. I would just point out that they do move from one area to the next. If that's what you want to do.
No, let's do question one then. Yeah. A10.
So in a sense, what the Greater Cambridge Partnership has done is outline a whole series of mitigations to deal with traffic growth across the area.
No, I'm not talking about across the area.
They will contribute to the wider whole in terms of we are looking at improvements to working with the rail authorities in terms of Cambridge South, which will encourage rail use along that corridor. We're looking at improvement Foxton, which I think is one of the questions that you asked later on, in that parking and the train is absolutely part of the lesser level crossing. So hopefully we can encourage people before they get along there. The city access paper that we're having later on is trying to set a context of how can we manage demand, because Cambridge is a sort of pull location and people will travel across the whole host of main corridors. People will travel along the A10 one day and then pick another route the other day. So we have to look at the entire gambit of interventions across the area to have an impact on the general levels of traffic and the traffic growth that you correctly outline over the next few years.
I'm not satisfied.
No, I'm terribly sorry. It's just a question and an answer. So should we have your second question, Mr. O'Byrne, which is Foxton, I think.
Yeah. Would you please confirm the proposed rural transport hub, which I've also called in colloquial terms a park and train at Foxton, will be an integral part of planning for the replacement of the level crossing there, that's at Foxton, and not a separate and later project? What we're concerned about is that the park and train will be put to one side while the level crossing planning takes place and goes in, and therefore it will be kicking the can down the road, so to speak.
And they'll be brought forward. They're brought forward together.
They will be. Good. Thank you very much. Could you confirm that Greater Cambridge Partnership will organise a study to determine how many parking places will be required at this new transport hub, or park and train as I've called it, I'd like to push the point that sufficient parking must be available to accommodate a maximum number of vehicles that could be filtered off from going north through Harston and onwards into Cambridge. It hardly needs to be said that commuting by train must be encouraged to the maximum. The journey time between Foxton and Cambridge main station is 13 minutes. Try to drive that same distance, same route by car at rush hour. It'll be at least an hour, so the attraction is obvious.
Repeat the question, which is the number of spaces at Foxton.
So that work will be undertaken as part of the plan work. There won't be a separate study. It will be undertaken as part of the work in terms of the parking requirements in the area.
And the Network Rail study in about 2013 had 85 spaces, and I think at the previous board meeting we all completely rubbished that and thought that was ludicrous. I was challenged by Dottie McLeod on BBC Radio Cambridge. I was talking about hundreds, and she said it should be jolly well be hundreds. You may not have read in our agenda paper, but Councillor Price would have read out if he was here that the Assembly used the word thousands. So I think we're all in the same space as you are on that particular point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Janet Lockwood. Councillor Janet Lockwood. District Councillor for which villages, Janet?
Harston and Hawkston.
Thank you.
So, similar to your previous questioners, I did notice you just said, Chairman, that the number of parking spaces was in the thousands from the Assembly.
The Assembly have discussed thousands.
Right, but I hope that was in terms of, I suppose that's all over, it's not just Foxton, weren't you thinking of?
Well, if we had Councillor Price here, we could go into more detail. I'm just reading what was written on the agenda paper.
So my question was, please would the board delay starting the public consultation on the various proposals for the Junction 11 park and ride arrangements until they've seen the evidence on how these will impact on the A10 traffic. But I hear you're going to present that evidence in the part of the public.
That was part, yes.
Because I understand it's being prepared but not yet ready. I'm concerned the park and ride will not work for the increased traffic along the A10 corridor. In fact, when the Foxton level crossing is bypassed, I think there's a distinct possibility of a continuous traffic jam from Foxton to Junction 11 at peak times, significantly delaying cars reaching the park and ride. So I urge you to research some way of transporting the new commuters from south of Harston to wherever they want to go, not using a car along the A10 through Harston, which I think is totally unsuited for that volume of traffic.
I think we sort of answered your question already.
I think you have.
Thank you. Jan Nain, a member of Harston Residents Group.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking on behalf of Harston Residents Group. Harston Residents Group believes that the proposed Hawkston Park and Ride is a short-term solution to the increased commuter traffic at the expense of a long-term, sustainable, integrated rail and road strategy along the A10 corridor. At current traffic volume, there is a queue of slow-moving cars and lorries right through Harston in rush hour. Harston Residents Group asks that the modelling and impact assessments of traffic through Harston be done to assess effects of traffic flow at peak times, including modelling of the knock-on effect of proposed developments at the Foxton crossing, ingress and egress from the park and ride site onto the A10, and very importantly, the effects of air and noise pollution, particularly on children and elderly residents. Harston Primary School is directly on the A10 in the centre of the village. We note that other solutions, including rail links and alternative sites and strategies, have not been put forward, and we ask that the decision to proceed to public consultation is postponed until the board has scrutinised all data on the expected effects of increased traffic through Harston and fully explored other options.
Peter?
So similar to previous answers, the information will be provided as part of the public consultation, and then we look forward to hearing people's views on that. I think separate to that is the work will continue on Foxton. It's at a less advanced stage, and that will be brought forward in terms of what the impact will be, both on the A10, but also the impact of the parking proposals in terms of what they will offer to enhance or encourage use of the rail service in the area.
Thank you. Peter, if you... Now, your report... Sorry? Thank you. And your report, Peter, should we do that bit first? We're then going to talk slightly sort of further up the Trumpeton Road, and then we're going to talk about Girton Interchange and M11.
Thank you. So that's right. Three parts of the report. So park and ride at junction 11. So you'll recall previous recommendation to get on and produce a business case by the end of this year for a park and ride site that primarily serves the motorway and the motorway traffic coming off of junction 11, coming north and turning into Cambridge. So the proposal, whilst we've consulted some time ago on the principle of park and ride, which there was broad support, what we want to do is to ensure that that is still the case, to come forward with detailed, particularly access proposals. So how would people access the park and ride site from that location? And that would form part of the business case development, which we're still on track to achieve by the end of this year. So in essence, the recommendation is to seek your approval to consult on those variety of options that exist in terms of park and ride site at that location. Do you want to briefly do? I think the second bit, the other bits are a little bit, hopefully says, rather immodestly said, a little bit more straightforward, was in terms of working with Highways England on both the Girton interchange and smart motorways. The Girton interchange, you do not need me to tell you that it's not a fully functioning interchange. It partly serves the movements required in the area, but significantly it doesn't. That interplays with our network quite significantly, i.e. people have to use the local network instead of being able to sit on the trunk road network. We've been working with the Highways England and their consultants to make a case for that. We continue to do so, and we anticipate that work concluding over the next few weeks. And we're seeking support for a delegated authority to really continue to petition the Highways Agency for interchange improvements. Smart motorways, again, is part of petitioning Highways England. People will notice there's a marked difference in usage of the M11 around Cambridge to slightly lower down around Stansted, which might be somewhat surprising, but it's a significant increase in there. Part of that is because we are using it effectively as a local distributor road to get around Cambridge because of impacts on all the existing prevailing conditions on the rest of our network. Nevertheless, what that means is that it is not terribly resilient as a motorway, and so the slightest problem on there brings it effectively to a standstill. Smart motorways is essentially hard shoulder running, delivers some additional capacity on the motorway itself, but also will get investment in Highways England on the junctions, and the junctions directly impact on our network, and so getting additional capacity in the junctions will give us some additional space that we could maybe promote additional public transport services by giving that capacity. So again, we've been working with them to demonstrate the case for that, and that would be part of a combined response to Highways England to encourage them to invest in our area. These are questions, Chair.
Thank you. So are there any questions, clarification for Peter? Shall I just let Phil? No. Yeah. Yes. I'm just going to try and draw out some of the themes, if I may. If we start on agenda page 44, which has got the map of concept, the potential park and ride at M11 Junction 11, there's just a couple of points I want to draw out. At the very bottom, Peter, there's something, it says dedicated park and ride access concept to be developed. And there's a red line that looks as if it's a slip road coming off the M11 going north, and then going across the A10. Did I hear in an earlier briefing that might go under the A10? The red line might go under the green.
We did, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to have a look at it. I mean, the A10 at that point is sort of slightly elevated above flat ground on either side by 1.5 meters or something. So what you would sort of dig down and under, is that the concept?
Essentially what we're trying to secure there is a grade separation between accessing the park and ride site from the motorway and having to go anywhere near the A10.
I never know what grade separation
So it's higher or lower?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we go under it or we go over it. So what doesn't happen is that vehicles come off the M11 and then impact on the movements on the A10.
Yeah. Imagine going over the A10 will get huge public resistance.
Well,
Very, 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 very public.
It has a very different feel
Yeah.
in terms of it's far more visually intrusive
Yeah.
than going under.
Okay.
And the grades probably work for us. Albeit some of my design engineers will be a little bit
Yeah.
concerned.
And then how do you think buses might get from the park and ride across into Trumpington? There's an orange sort of loop-the-loop at the bottom, and then there's the agricultural bridge at the top, and then there's sort of through the middle, I think it's called a donut.
Yeah. So again, the same principle. What we don't want is the buses getting caught in general traffic because it doesn't benefit them, it doesn't benefit general traffic. So we either look at an enhancement, a significant enhancement to the junction itself. And again, that's quite expensive, it's quite intrusive in terms of Highways England. Or can we use the agricultural bridge that exists to say, again, this is a separate access arrangement where buses can use them and not impact and not get caught in other traffic.
Okay. And then finally, would there, if this proceeded, would there be lots of screening and trees, etc., around the boundary?
Absolutely. I mean, again, that's something
which aren't
that
necessarily
you're never going
shown.
to get from a map.
Yeah.
So as we were going forward, we would have to bring that alive in terms of artist impressions to say, you know, what we would be hoping to achieve is you can't see this. And the access and egress arrangements are such that they have minimal, if any, impact on the existing local network.
Okay, thank you for that. If I can then move you up Trumpington Road, and the agenda pack has got that map, and I think most of us, you know, I live in Grantchester, not a million miles away, that whether you call them the Park and Ride Junction or the Waitrose Junction, you know, it's a terrible, terrible bottleneck. So I think what you're proposing is you don't have any solutions right now, but this would be part of your thinking. It goes right up to include the Long Road Junction, right up to include Brooklands Avenue Junction. So effectively, I think what you're saying is it's you know, having got people into a bus at the Park and Ride, it's then the whole way back into the centre of the urban.
It's the whole journey. So encouraging people to use Park and Ride is about then the length of journey and critically the reliability of the journey once they get in that Park and Ride vehicle. So we cannot just look at any Park and Ride site without looking at the flow beyond that, both to and from. And I have to say, I was stood at the Waitrose Junction a couple of weeks ago in pouring rain. I had to go inside, it was so cold to get a cup of tea. Just looking at those movements, and it's a tightly constrained environment, but we have to come up with a way of ensuring that there's a general improvement in traffic flow, not just public transport flow around those areas, because particularly at key times, you know, it is really heavily congested.
So just to manage public expectations, I don't think we're what I might call launching a scheme on Trumpington Road to the same extent as we've had the Milton Road scheme and the Histon scheme. We're not doing that, are we? This is a first look. Is that right?
This is a very early look. And what the paper says is we just want to involve some of the local residents groups, some local stakeholders, so let's just start seeing what the art of the possible might be, and then that needs to be shaped and scaled into something that we can just start to develop and deliver over a period of time. But we are acutely aware we need to try and put some public transport improvements in here.
Great. From a city perspective, particularly on Trumpington Road, Lewis, I don't know if there's anything you want to add or...
No, these are just early thoughts, aren't they? So it's we're not there yet. If residents and councillors rightly pick up that these are in the public domain would welcome input on that.
And then finally, if I could just ask you, the M11 is about. I think Highways England are broadly speaking on our side, aren't they? They're fed up with. They view the M11 as a major national road that starts in London and ends in Leeds, where they are fed up with the fact that we're all using it for commuter traffic twice a day or more often around our stretch. So they're on board with the concept that they've got as much of a problem with the M11 as we have, which I think is good news. The door is open. They do everything in 5-year units, so we're trying to squeeze into their next 5-year unit, which I think is called RIS2, Road Improvement Strategy 2. And our proposal to them is going to be using the hard shoulder, not making it any wider than it is, possibly an inch or two, but using the hard shoulder, possibly having these variable restrictions, so at peak hours it might be down to 50 miles an hour, cars go closer, more go through, and then them or us paying for junction improvements, particularly at 13 and 11, because that's where the backup is.
And hard shoulder in each area is not all the time. So we're not trying to deliver a huge increase in highway capacity. What we're saying is the resilience of that route is such that having an additional lane to use perhaps at peak times, along with particularly the pinch points of the junction improvements, would deliver some benefit both for us and for highways.
Well, and we all know that there are a lot, whenever there's an accident, the whole thing just clogs up, and 3 lanes might help.
There's no resilience in the network.
And then finally, at Girton interchange, if I'm right, where we've been told by Highways England, absolutely no way can we go into their A14 scheme, and we've accepted that, but what we're trying to push ourselves into is their A4, is there what scheme there? Oxford-Cambridge scheme.
Expressway.
Oxford, so we're trying to push ourselves into their East-West Oxford-Cambridge Expressway, and I think at the moment there are sort of 2 bookends. There's a sort of roughly 30 to 40 million pound idea, which basically just means if you go north up the M11, you would then go on to the 428 seamlessly. And if you're coming along the 428, I think you come off, do 1 roundabout, 2 roundabouts and south. There are some pink lines on the map that Highways England themselves published about 3 years ago in a letter to Coton Parish Council, which is in the public domain. And that is sort of costed at 30 to 40 million. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's, I think, what people call all movements, which is costed at sort of 250 million, but would be the spaghetti junction to end all spaghetti junctions, and you could just go from everywhere to everywhere without stopping. Is that a fair description of the 2 bookends?
The orders of magnitude are of that sort of nomenclature, yes. And clearly, I mean, I think the Highways England will be saying the big one all looks very terribly difficult and it's a very large amount of money, whereas actually the sort of shorter term option would deliver some benefits for our local network, and therefore we would just want to try and continue to give them a nudge, so that their pink lines become maybe firmer pink lines.
We've already met with the Chief Executive of Highways England, Lewis. I think you led that meeting at the beginning of the year. We've written to the Chief Executive of Highways England, and what we're proposing to do now is more than just write a letter. We've got consultants on board.
We're using their consultants to use their framework to demonstrate the case for these interventions.
So this is getting quite far along the way, and the exciting thing I hadn't realised is we're paying for and using their consultants
To make the case.
So with any luck, they ought to really believe the case because it's partly coming from their own mouth. Yeah, great. Sorry to labour that, but I think it's useful to bring those points out. Any more questions of clarification?
I just want to, certainly on the smart motorways, when we went to meet Highways England, we wanted them to listen, to give priority to public transport in the extra 3rd lane that's created. Is there any potential that they'll listen to that? Because simply encouraging more traffic, including more commuter traffic, will simply just block the 3 lanes eventually, won't it?
But we're simply doing that on a permanent basis. Roads encourage traffic, and it's likely that an already busy motorway will get busier. There is very little chance that Highways England go down the line of a bus-only lane. They tried that on the M4. It didn't prove terribly successful by any measurement, and so it's unlikely that they do that. But what we want to continue to work with them on is how do we use this additional capacity? And I think it's important to recognise the additional capacity is not just on the motorway. If the additional capacity on the motorway is to deal with resilience, they've got to alter the motorway junctions, which gives us additional capacity that we may want to assign to public transport, so that, I mean, going back to as with the
special lane into
so
the park and ride.
Yeah.
So there's some form of, it might only be 300, 400, 500 yards of bus lane, but it gets them past the pinch point. So we have that ability and that flexibility at the junctions, and that's entirely arguable because the junctions are the local network. So I think that's the real opportunity in public transport terms. I don't see them simply saying a third lane is a bus lane on the motorway, because they've been doing that previously.
So we reopened some of the earlier work on Junction 11 and also Junction 13 in particular, because they don't work at the moment.
So we focus on this recommendation, the recommendations here, and we say, should that then happen, we've already got some work in our back pocket, and we'd really rather like to progress this as soon as we can.
Ian, do you have any more questions or clarification?
Yeah, I think it's just about how it's all joined up, because we've got the 4 to 8 proposals between Black Cat and Captain Gibbet, which is, I think, Highways into another team. You've got the Oxford, Milton Keynes, Cambridge Expressway, and they are different teams, both of them, as far as I'm aware. And I think the important bit really for us actually is to make sure that not so much that we're joined up, that they're joined up, because one would influence the other. And my real question to Peter, I think, actually is to making sure that they are joined up, because when I went to Milton Keynes, we had a presentation by Highways England in respect of the Oxford Milton Keynes corridor, and Girton didn't get a mention. Oxford got plenty of discussion, okay, because I appreciate the fact that they've got considerable problems down their end of the expressway. So I want to be confident, Peter, that we are all joining up, not just us, but their teams as well. And so maybe at some point it might be useful to see if we can't pull the 2 teams together with your help to make sure that nothing falls through a gap. I mean, the 4 to 8 should be, in theory, announced not too long before the route. So I just want to make sure it's all joined up with Highways England, Mr. Chairman.
And I think that's a key role that we take on board. And so in terms of the modelling we've been doing around Girton, we've been modelling Expressway, and we've been modelling 4 to 8. So actually, and using their consultants to quote back to them. So I think a key role for us is we need to make the connections and then keep pushing it back to not just within Highways England, but then across the various executive agencies, so Network Rail and the like, to say this is why it's important to invest in our area. And these are, you can have every road lead to the Girton interchange, but the Girton, unless you do something with it, you're not doing any distance past it.
That was my query.
My concern is that Junction 11, Junction 13 are already really dangerous, so the long queues on the hard shoulder already, because there's little capacity to get to Cambridge and CBC. So we've already got the hard shoulder being used for typically half a mile or more before you get to the junction, and Junction 13 it is very dangerous.
Thank you, Claire. Phil, anything, any more questions, clarification? So should we move on to the board discussion? So if we look at our page 39, paragraph 2 recommendations, we could take them in that order. So the first one is to talk about a new park and ride and work along Trovington Road. Does anybody want to air some views or kick off a debate on that? Claire?
Kick off with a thought is, I guess none of us like park and rides. They're not the ideal future solution, but we've got a really critical issue there already at this junction. So we've got 17,000 or more people already working in the hospital and the university and the businesses on CBC, let alone going into Cambridge as well. That's about to increase with Papworth Hospital coming in this year, September this year, I think. I think there's likely to be 5,000 more people going into CBC, again, even aside from going into Cambridge immediately, as in this year, before we even get through to the plan. So accelerating some solution is really critical. If there's something better than Park and Ride, then brilliant. But if there isn't, we need to press on with this as quickly as we can. So I'm really concerned that we've already got a big issue there. If we don't do something, we won't be able to get the people in that are already going to work now, let alone patients and visitors. We've said a lot more. The further back we can collect the cars and put people on buses, the better, or on cycles or any other mode. Trains are obviously ideal, but we haven't got the Cambridge South Station yet, so we're going to have to put people on something that is realistic now. So I feel quite passionately that unless we do something quite quickly, we're going to have a really big congestion area there.
Phil, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I would really agree with what Claire has said. I would think this is not a long-term solution, but our problems are going to be very short-term. We need somewhere where we can aggregate dispersed traffic to affect a modal shift, and this is one way in which we can do that. So what we know is in the pipeline as regards campus is going to require us to do something in the short term. Whether or not this is the long-term solution, I doubt, but certainly in the short term, I think we need to do something in that area.
I started with, I couldn't remember when we started building Park and Ride sites. Okay, so I did a bit of history. Believe it or not, the first history is Bagnley Road, which was actually in June 1996. And the others have followed on since. So, and that's the 5 which are around Cambridge. And I think, by and large, they are well received and quite effective in getting people out of their cars at that point, and onto a bus. And they are popular. I certainly use Park and Ride myself. And so therefore, I think it is essential that we do look towards the future. I have looked at the detailed maps with officers in respect of underground. I was personally taken with that, it's fair to say, when looked at it. So
When you say underground, you mean tunnels?
Under to the Park and Ride side of the M11. I was quite taken,
under the A10.
Under the A10. I was quite taken with that personally, but obviously that's early days. But I was taken with that with all the other suggestions which have come, which we've mentioned anyway. I also went through this with the going to Trumpington, and you are quite right. It is going to be extremely difficult. The Waitrose area, the junctions there, going down to the long road junctions. I think it will be very interesting to see what Kane come up with, and there could be some works, I think, with signs and signalling in particular, because I think the signalling does need updating considerably, and that may improve. But I have sat down with officers in detail about this, and I think there might be a solution. Whether it's terribly ideal, whether it will help, I think the jury's out of it, because it is already very congested around that area, and I look forward perhaps to seeing something coming forward. But there is, I'm trying to find it on the thing, there is certainly land close to something which may help, which I have to say, it's on apologies for people. If it's just step from here, okay, which can actually give you a bit of space down that section of Trumpington Road, it still doesn't solve it when you come off of it and Trumpington Road and the other end. You're still going to hit the traffic. So I think it would be very interesting to see the cost benefit, to be honest with you, about whether that's of value. But I think I'm content with the moment to see that go forward in respect of traffic, etc. So those are my comments.
Well, as others have said, I mean, we do have a major issue that we need to both increase the out-of-town options for people, Cambridge South, Park and Train, the other options, but yeah, we can't put off for long a significant intervention just with the number of people coming into the biomedical campus. At the moment, we've just got a growing amount of road traffic, both coming up and down the M11 and also coming up the A10. I can appreciate the view that we need to, from residents, groups and others further out, that we need to bring forward the investments at Foxton and elsewhere as well. But we've got to try and do both.
So I think the mood of everybody is that this is something that is desperately needed, most particularly for the biomedical campus, Papworth and Addenbrooke's. But I've certainly been cognizant of the public questions that we've had from the area, and the benefit of getting public questions 3 days ahead is that one can sort of think about them and ponder them over the period and have a pondering. And so I've done some pondering as an alternative to 2.1.1 written on my agenda here as well, and I'm going to read this out because I haven't got enough copies.
Michelle's written some out, but you've made an amendment.
So this is my sort of thinking that the board may want to reconsider instead of 2.1/1. And I'm going to read it out because people on the television cameras will know what we're saying. So effectively, I'm trying to do what I think the public questioners have asked us to do, and if I haven't got there properly, everyone will just have to apologise, accept my apologies. So in respect of a new park and ride at M11 Junction 11 and the associated public transport or vehicle access onto the M11 and the A10, I suppose I mean on and off the M11 and A10, the board, depending on my colleagues' views, might agree that further analysis should be undertaken and opinions sought and then brought back to a future meeting of the Joint Assembly and the Executive Board in the form of an outline business case. And there's a subtlety there. It doesn't have the word full outline business case. This is an earlier stage. It's an outline business case for these or better options for further discussion and a decision at that time whether or not to proceed. Any public consultation will be deferred until after that decision, which is, I think, what public opinion and a lot of the questions were looking for. And then just so that we're absolutely crystal clear, such analysis should include as a minimum, let's recapitulate what is the rationale for the scheme, including why there is a need for a change from the existing provisions. Now, I've handwritten onto a piece because I was listening to some more of the comments. So if people have got the typed version, they may not have my next handwritten comment. Traffic modelling along the A10 and M11, including air and noise pollution. We heard that with one of the questioners. Dovetailing with a study currently undertaken. Now, I don't know if you remember, but the GCP is doing a separate study through, is it Skanska, Rachel?
No, Atkins, I think.
Well, Atkins. So this is what I'm referring to here. A separate study currently being undertaken on the need to provide better transport links to Addenbrooke's, the new Papworth Hospital, the growing number of jobs at the biomedical campus, together with patient visitors. This is a wider study on travel to work, screens, whether we subsidise buses and all of that. It's a wider study to dovetail that. Now, as everybody said, dovetailing with the potential interventions at Foxton, being greater car parking to serve the train station and or a bridge underpass for the A10 road to avoid the level crossing. Dovetailing with the emerging plans for a new train station at Cambridge South, which we didn't hear a lot about, but I think that's important. And dovetailing with the emerging plans for the Cam Metro, which is obviously pretty crucial. And also, now let's just have a compare and contrast exercise between 1, not doing this at all, no new park and ride. 2, putting the new park and ride immediately west of Junction 11. 3, expanding the existing Trumpington Road Park and Ride, either going up, making it possibly a single story or double story car park, or going sideways, taking more land out of adjacent land, or 4, something completely utterly different. And that's analysis. In the meantime, we should get opinions as a minimum from the following people: Harston and Hawkston Parish Councils and Trumpington Residents Association. I didn't type in councillors, but I think district councillors are always taken for read in this. Addenbrooke's, the Papworth Hospital, the biomedical campus. This is particularly what it's looking to serve. That's the need. And then quite clearly the Mayor for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and the combined authority, because they're in charge of strategic planning, transport planning for the area. So that was working over the last couple of days, and also just now, the best that I could come up with. It's a very long resolution, trying to recognise the broad views that I think we think there is a need, but possibly more rigour and discipline needs to go into sort of what you might call proving the case and looking at alternatives. So I put that to my board colleagues, and I don't know if anyone wants to start off with what they would think about that.
Well, I just think that it's a much more toned and thought out next stage, rather than just jumping in with a specific park and ride proposal. So I welcome it, Francis.
Thank you.
I've had comments from residents and councillors, etc. Certainly I would be happy to second this, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I don't think you've missed anything. If you have, somebody will correct me, I'm sure, Rachel or Peter will see, have we forgotten something? I don't think you have, but I think make sure I look to both Rachel to make sure that we've captured everything that we've heard in what you're suggesting. So that what I will provide. I don't think you have, but this little bit I'd like to just make sure, just a check.
Claire,
Yes, I think it looks very comprehensive as a resolution, or whatever we're going to agree, recommendation. I'd just still say this is really urgent as far as I'm concerned, so provided we keep the sense of urgency, then let's look at alternatives or...
Yeah. Well, I think the working assumption is that there would be a public consultation in now. Let's call it the summer autumn. I know one tries to avoid the peak holiday period, and it depends on how far, whether it's just before the peak holiday period or after the peak holiday period. Sometimes we have extra weeks in the peak holiday period, but the public should assume that there will be a consultation around about that sort of time, I think.
All these lucky people who seem to have 4 weeks holiday, I don't know where they're getting from.
Bill?
I would support it, but agree with Claire that we shouldn't let this linger too long in the emergency dramatic, but I would support it.
Great, thank you. So, unless anyone has any other comments, I'll put that one to a vote.
We do.
Yeah.
Just ask Rachel and Peter, do you think, bearing in mind the discussion we had, have we got it, have we captured everything?
Yes.
Thank you. With that reassurance, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'll put it to a vote. Thank you. Did you get that? Now, we're not quite there on this one, because we've now got 2.12, which is the submission on Highways England on the Girton Interchange, the Eminent Smart Motorway, which I think the sense of the meeting was we supported. On that one, I thought what we could do is tack on the extra words at the very end, and I'll just read them slowly. After the words, blah, 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 second road investment strategy, put, and that the Mayor/combined authority be asked to support the submission. Effectively, both of us are talking with one voice.
Yeah.
On that basis, that one. Thank you. And then the third one is, we're going to call this, it's a name change, we're going to call it West of Cambridge Package rather than Western Walsall. It's just a name change. Happy with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Agenda item 9 starts on page 49, the city access update. there is a public question from Councillor Oscar Gillespie. And Councillor Westby.
Thank you, Chair and Board. I'm a Green Party councillor for the city centre. Some of the headline objectives for the GCP listed on the landing page are better, greener transport, strong and healthy communities and air quality. I'd really like to see these as well. These are needed in the city centre just as much as at the outer edges. But I'm confused as to why the GCP has apparently not done much to research, to promote or to develop car clubs as part of the transport mix for Greater Cambridge. In particular, electric car clubs seem like a massive opportunity to improve air quality, reduce private car ownership, provide better access to electric vehicle technology, improve the street scene by taking private cars off the street, and accelerating electric vehicle charging infrastructure with help from the provider, as well as offering cheap occasional access. Car clubs can bring electric vehicles onto the second-hand market faster and cheaper because of the way they purchase it and dispose of fleet cars. We have a car club operator who have not done much to promote their business and the mode that they use, but in places like Norwich, Oxford and Exeter, car clubs are growing and electric car clubs are growing. I've seen a section on car clubs in the South Cambs transport strategy, so I know they have been discussed, I know they're on the radar, but I had hoped to see some mention of car clubs in the City Access update or the big conversation report and consultation. One respondent mentioned them unprompted in response to question 8, what would be one thing that would improve travel in and around Greater Cambridge. But it's not surprising that respondents aren't mentioning them if you're not pitching them to the public and showcasing the places like Cambridge where they've succeeded, exploring the way that they could interact with other schemes. So perhaps you can help me to understand why car clubs haven't been brought up yet. This question has been taken as part of the context of question 9, the access study, and I note the option of an intelligent charging option. Everyone wants an unintelligent charging option, but I think the scope to integrate car clubs with intelligent charging so that if you're using a car club you get a discount, for example, or allowing car club users to travel in a bus lane as taxis are allowed to nudge people into using car clubs so that they're not just something that you walk past and see, but so that you think about using them. So some opportunities have been missed, but to finish on a positive, I'd like to invite you to come to a public exhibition being run by Transition Cambridge Clean Wheels, a group who are trying to promote electric vehicles, on the 9th of April at the Central Library. And I'd like to ask you to commit to exploring electric car clubs and car clubs as part of the next stage of the access study, and consider why people want to continue using their cars as part of the modelling of different users. Why do they want autonomy? Do they want to be able to access sick relatives if they need to? Is there an occasional journey they need to make? And to look at ride sharing potentially as well, of bringing the price of using car clubs down so that it's more of an option for commuting.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to answer the transport portfolio on that?
I'm going to let you answer, but I've got a question actually mentioned the date. Is there a time?
It's from 12 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the Central Library. I'll be happy to pass details through the chair and the committee manager to all of you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's the time I was looking on.
Thanks. I mean, essentially, we work with a wide variety of stakeholders and partners to deliver stuff. We aim to complement them, not duplicate. I know that city colleagues and county colleagues are working on car clubs. We are plugged into that. We're particularly interested from the electric vehicle side, and I'm sure you're aware we're working with city colleagues in terms of charge points over the next 3 or 4 weeks going in the City Council. So we're interested in developments, and we think we will get involved when there's, when city colleagues and county colleagues call upon us to do that. But yet recognising particularly electric vehicles do have a role to play in the wider city access agenda.
I think, Councillor Guthrie, what I'd add is we don't have a mission merely to reduce pollution. We're not that narrow. It has to be to help modal shift, to help economic growth, to help prosperity. So if one can link electric vehicles and car clubs to the wider stuff, then we're interested. If it's just for pollution and pollution only, I'm afraid you have to look elsewhere. You have to look at the county council or the city council. But if it's wider, then we're interested. It sounds like you would like to perhaps possibly sort of become the city champion for electric vehicles or car clubs or something like that. Now, if we haven't really talked about this, and I'm now talking out of turn, but our smart work stream does allocate small pots of money to clever ideas. And if you want to approach our smart work stream with an idea or two that would want specific cash funding, that we could seed fund something, put a proposal together, work up an idea, and the smart work stream, which at the moment I'm chairing, I won't chair forever, I think it would probably sit in smart, given it's electric, we could look at it. So if there's a specific idea you want us to look at, let us know. Yeah. Stephen.
Chair, I was just wondering whether it's worth referencing from a planning authority. Sorry, I'm Stephen Kelly, I'm the Joint Director for Planning in the City and South Cambridgeshire. We very much see the car club concept as being central to a lot of the discussions that we're having with developers around sustainable transport and travel plan choices. Certainly, by all means, engage with GCP. But to provide some reassurance that the Planning Authority and working with Smarter Cambridge and so on are actively pursuing the consideration of all of those types of transport solutions to just reduce the number of vehicles on the road. So it was really by way of assurance that it's certainly in the front of both, I know, the county colleagues' transport discussions, but my team's engagement with developers at the moment.
Great, thank you. And just for the benefit of other questioners, we do have, I'm afraid, slightly different rules with councillors who we do have a little bit more of a dialogue, whereas I'm very sorry, but for members of the public, it's just a straight question and answer. Thank you. So I think we now move on to the paper, the City Access paper, page 49. Peter, I don't know if you want to...
Just a few words, Chair, if I may. So the paper does a couple of things. One is a general update on some of the city access work streams. So linking that with the previous conversation, work on air quality in terms of charge points, and continuing to work with the bus companies on trying to introduce electric and hybrid electric vehicles in the city. And a general update on the signals work. So we've undertaken an audit of the signals. That's now been completed. We now are in the process of making sense of that to say, what do we need to optimise, what do we need to connect, and where and what do we need to ensure we've got priority in our signal stock. So the next board will see a sort of work programme for how we see that rolling out, and linking to, for example, the sort of Trumpington Road, can we deliver really quite short-term improvements, and are they a little bit less intrusive than big bits of tarmac. And then we're progressing the public realm, so working with Steve and colleagues on the SBD for movement in places and making progress on that. The substantive part of the paper is around demand management and what options are available to us, to you as policymakers. And then the caveat comes at the start, it's not about making decisions now. What the paper is doing is to say, this is the piece of work that we're undertaking around really understanding the policy levers available to us to have a real impact in terms of demand management in the city centre and key hotspots around the city. At the start, we're looking at what public transport system is required to encourage people to move. And it's quite often people like me come in on suits and ties and say, we need good public transport. But actually, what is good public transport, and what would the impact of good public transport mean? So what is it in terms of frequencies? What is it in terms of reliability? What is it in terms of ticketing costs? What hours of operation do we need at park and ride sites? So getting under the skin of that and understanding that and saying to the board, this is what a public transport package of measures would look like. And it's service focused, it's not infrastructure focused. We need the infrastructure, principally to gain the reliability, but this is the sort of public transport network we would need. And this, on the other side, the stick, is how we would encourage people to use it. So starting very much with physical measures, we closing roads on a temporary basis or indeed on a permanent basis, how we look at parking charges, parking availability, workplace parking levy, and what impact would that have. Workplace parking levy is an interesting one because actually, when you sit back, it's probably not a demand management tool. It doesn't manage demand. It raises revenue, which can be reinvested in the alternatives. But so really understanding that, and then moving forward to sort of clearer charging basis around maybe toxicity or emissions charges. So the type of vehicles that we want to allow into our city that might impact on their quality, but we need to understand what really would be the impact in terms of congestion. And then finally, maybe some form of intelligent charging that says, based on the prevailing conditions of the network, we're going to charge people to enter or to use that network. So it's trying to understand the impacts of those policy levers in detail so that we can say if you did X and you did Y, or we probably did a bit of X and a bit of Y on a blended measure, this would be the impact. This is how it perhaps could be afforded, particularly in terms of delivering public transport improvements. These are the equality issues and the equality measures we need to address. Clearly around age, around low pay, around the sort of city, non-city resident issues. And so it's about bringing that together and saying, this is the information that the board may want to start to make future decisions, or indeed continue the conversation, the big conversation, with the sort of the public and key stakeholders about these are the sort of issues and sort of decisions we need to take going forward to have an impact in terms of managing demand in our city. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. What I'm encouraged by is that effectively you are linking it back to another big consultation, so that effectively you're saying it, I mean, although the decision might at some stage end up being the board's, what one's trying to do is engage with the public and make it a decision of the community, and the community comes to the view that this is the right thing to do.
And so taking forward the big consultation thus far, taking that a step forward with more information.
Yeah, and I think there were 10,000 responses to the previous big consultation. So I mean, it is big. That's what's been really good about it. Any questions of clarification for Peter on this? No. I'm just going to draw you out. It's my great bugbear is traffic lights, and I think there are three things you're doing looking at traffic lights. One is whether all the existing traffic lights, whether the time that they're red, green, amber, individually should be tweaked and improved so that traffic can flow through them. The second thing you're doing is whether there is a string of traffic lights down a road, seeing if they can be linked so that if you go through one, you then go through them all. And the third thing you're looking at is sort of radar sensors, so that some traffic lights, if a bus approaches it, it knows it's being approached by a bus and turns green in anticipation of a bus going through. So I've now understood there are three sorts, and if I'm right, Peter, you're looking at all three.
That's right, Chair. And I recognise that signals doesn't necessarily float everybody's boat, but to give an analogy of where I just come from, when they put cycle superhighways in the centre of the City of London, it effectively took 15% of the road capacity out. The only way that could be managed was by spending tens of millions of pounds in traffic signals to manage the network, to ensure the flows were right, or an optimisation in terms of we're giving time to pedestrians and then time to traffic, and we give priority to buses. So actually, it can be quite an important tool in terms of the wider delivery of our agenda.
Brilliant, thank you. Should we move to the board? Yeah, Claire.
It's not a question of clarification. I'm just, as humans, we don't much like management, demand management either. So we need to look to the greater good and try and find some way of taking things forward. Really, really important that these systems are very intelligent, as in very intelligent, not just 2 clicks per day, and they're fair for everyone, both in the city and outside the city coming in. What I really want to see from this consultation is behaviour nudges to make the whole area easier to move around throughout the whole week, so Saturday mornings as well as Monday evenings and all the rest of it. So very intelligent and very fair are the key criteria for me.
So we'll keep going on the general board discussion. Phil, anything to add?
Well, I just want to say that I think this is hugely welcome for what we've been asking for, which is to paint a picture of how it all fits together and to start that work off about linking supply and demand in ways that people can see. It's not just about raising money and parking rides are part of a bigger picture and parts of what we will need to do that might not make sense in isolation. Part of the bigger picture makes lots of sense. So it's about the integration and the coordination and setting out a direction that makes sense in the whole. So I think it's hugely welcome.
Thank you. There is.
Well, we clearly need a big uplift in the quality of public transport because several of these measures won't work without that. But they do offer the prospect of funding, particularly a better spread of service, because we've got a lot of people coming in doing 12-hour shifts. And as Mr. Blake said, we've got to have a big focus on quality. But we need to cut the number of cars, vehicles, and we still have the target of that 10 to 15% reduction on 2011 figures, even though we have had an increase, as was shown recently. So we have to persist with a discussion with the public and with other stakeholders about measures to cut the number of vehicles coming in, as Councillor Gillespie's raised, and as is already the case with initiatives including electric taxis and electric charging. We've got to move on each of the different categories: buses, taxis, commercial vehicles, and cars, to shift people from dirtier vehicles, dirtier engines, to cleaner options over time. So I think it's right that we have this stick, if you like, but we need to have the carrot as well. So we do need to just keep on these initiatives, and I think we need to develop this into a set of proposals for consultation. So it's good to see them all laid out in terms of the options. And also it's important that we continue to rethink about the city centre, because we still have too many vehicles finding their way through. And whilst the original document, which I seem to see over there, is not going to be the basis of it, there's still some need to just look at reconfiguring the city centre. At the moment we have all of the car park, say from the busiest car park, Grand Arcade, immediately routes most of the cars straight onto the main public transport and cycle route, and we just don't have the space. So I'm excited by the potential to have a CAM metro, but we clearly need to have both that major improvement in public transport, but also these more negative measures, but ones that could generate the income to ensure that that public transport runs for 15 hours a day and is more varied than the current offer. I'd like to see more small minibus stroke taxis in the city centre, subject to it not being overly congested, as well as the CAM metro. We need to have more variety. It isn't the case that everybody's just going from outside of the city into a single point. We need to have people being able to get around. And within this is the potential to fund the revenue costs of a much improved set of public transport options.
Great. So with that, should we move to a... Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I went back, as Lewis has said, to 2007, 16, and I turn to the page, okay, which had, I've crossed out one of them for those that remember the leaflet, okay, but I actually looked at what we were saying then. Better bus services, better park and ride, better pedestrians, better cycling, improve public space and air quality. I'll skip the next one. Workplace levy. On-street parking controls, including residence parking. Smart technology, travel planning. So my first question that I put to myself was, what's missing that we said in 2016, which we're not saying now? And the one thing that did stand out was about travel planning. We all know at school times when the schools are on holiday, and we know what that result of that is, which is less traffic on the road. So I do want to see travel planning put back into that mix, because I think it is an important part. If you look back to Park and Ride, in Trumpington, we've actually increased facilities there for schools to actually drop off children and get into smaller vehicles. Okay, so I see that as an integral part of the whole process. So I think it's about time we prioritise as well, because we won't be able to do all of that all at once. So I think we do need to start to consider with stakeholders, with other people and the communities about what's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we will not be able to do all those. Fully supported these signalling, because I think there is a lot of areas that can be improved just by including the signals. What effect would that have? When it comes to other things in respect of, I've written down here, apologies almost to Lewis, city centre car parks, okay, because that's an important part, okay, because people don't always want to go into the city centre, they're happy to park and ride, but if they have an opportunity to go into the centre and there is space in the car parks in the city centre, some people will not change their modal shift, they will go into the city centre and park. So I think there is an issue which needs to be addressed at some point, which is about city centre car parks. I'm not suggesting we all do this all at once, but we do need to take all this on board. Now, when it comes to some of the other issues in respect of the demand management, which is laid out on page 51, one of the issues I think that does need to be considered is about the traffic modelling, and it's not just for people inside our area of South Council of the City, but actually further afield, and that consultation with stakeholders has to be wider, much wider, because lots of people come from Kings Lynn and March and Chatteris and Royston and Saffron Walden. So I think actually when it comes to some of the issues as we go forward, we need to broaden out. It's not just for people who are in Cambridge or South Cambs, but a much wider field. So I think when it comes to some of the modelling that you've seen, and that's at 8.3, I'll turn over to where I wrote it. That needs to be extended quite dramatically, I think, into workplace parking, toxic charging, road closures, etc. All that would impact on people coming in to work, or the shops, etc. So I want to see a much broader. So my really issue is prioritisation, travel planning back in, and actually that's more on the traffic modelling for people who work outside of the city and outside of the GCP area.
I think that's fair.
Thank you.
Thank you. You'll kindly take that on board. Thank you. So if we move to the recommendations, taking them in order to page 49, 2.1, there is a small typo, third line, the reference paragraph 7.7 should be to 8.7.
Yeah.
Would we be happy, sorry, Claire and Phil, if you had a vote, would you be happy on that one?
Yeah.
3 of us, happy. On the second one, which is about engaging with partners, particularly the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority and obviously the Mayor, happy on that one?
Can I just make when it says other partners, I think it's quite crucial that we engage there with Cambridge County Council and business and the university we quite specifically put the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. I think we need to be quite specific in who we are actually engaging with by when it presents our Abbey Brooks business. It doesn't need to change the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, but I do think we need to make the point that it is a much broader base that we need to go on to.
So could we put that in the minutes very kindly, thank you. And then on the third one, support the principle of electric bus pilot and delegate approval of the pilot to the Director of Transport and Consultation Executive Board Chairman. Is this a money thing?
It's a money thing, but it will only be a small money thing unless it comes back here formally.
Just to give me what small mean, not exceeding.
I think if it was above tens of thousands.
Perfect. Thank you.
If it was above that, we would bring it back here, Chairman.
Great. Happy, everybody?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we go to agenda item 10, which starts on page 67, and we have Keith Warburton's question. Peter, thank you. Keith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. I'm a resident of Gamlingay. I'm here as a private individual. In my history, I've been involved in the telecommunications marketplace, the IT marketplace. Latterly, before retiring, I was the editor and publisher of the leading news publication for the video conferencing publication, for the video conferencing industry, which also includes telemedicine, hence the scope of my question. I noticed that the largest element of the Greater Cambridge Partnership's funding strategy is about facilitating people travelling into Cambridge in as green a manner as possible, and of course that's to be lauded and superb. Also welcomed is the objective to harness smart technology to facilitate economic growth and quality of life. And it's that element that these questions cover. I would say that smart technology is not necessarily simply about bus signs and smart traffic lights. Many residents enjoy their workplaces at various locations in and around Cambridge. The well-recognised problem is of the travel in between, and that's what GCP seeks to address. But shouldn't the GCP be actively seeking ways to reduce our population's need to travel? Reducing the need for travel doesn't mean discouraging travel by way of cost or inconvenience, or as I've heard it termed, demand management. Too often, this is the easiest knee-jerk response. Rather, it means offering viable and acceptable alternatives to travel. Research has shown, quite conclusively, that contrary to the popular view that many people would like to be able to work from home, in reality, most people would prefer to be able to work within a 10-minute walk or cycle ride from home, for obvious reasons. If this is what people would like, shouldn't the GCP be actively working towards it? So my first question is, would it not be attractive for the envisaged local travel hubs to become local travel and work hubs, providing meeting rooms with high-speed communications and conferencing facilities? Now, we should also recognise that through remote diagnostics and communications, many of our health and care services can be delivered to the user without the need for travel and without the need for any technological skills on the part of the user. A reduction in the number of journeys to our hospitals and GP surgeries is surely a worthwhile objective. GP practices are often struggling to be viable and/or handle the workload. So my second question, why not facilitate local consultation rooms located in GP practices with state-of-the-art telemedicine systems linked to specialist consultants at centres of excellence? And finally, I sincerely hope the Greater Cambridge Partnership might officially adopt as one of its targets a reduction in the need for travelling.
So thank you for the question. I think it's a very interesting one. I get to answer it largely because I'm chairman of the Smart Work Stream. Question one, local travel hubs. I mean, I have a tremendous sympathy with what you said about local travel hubs. I think there's two things I'd say. Firstly, we are absolutely keen to make these as bottom-up as possible, that they're what the local community wants and are designed by the local community. So I don't think we would impose the concept of meeting rooms, etc., 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 on the local community. But we could definitely work with them and suggest to the local community, and there are 4 being done at the moment, aren't there? Foxton, Swavesey, Oakington and Whittlesford, that goes in. So we'll take that on board. I think it sort of links a little bit into planning. Stephen's over there. You know, there's a lot of people think that there's more scope in the villages for redundant farm buildings and small little employment centres. That's really a planning issue. You've got to get planning first before you put in the broadband and the cable and things like that. There's the broadband initiative going through the county council. On your other one about GP practices, I think that's very interesting. I mean, I think I'm not ducking that one. A large lot of that's got to come from the NHS in the first place. But the concept I have tremendous sympathy with. So thank you for your question, and I accept all the concept behind it. Looks like Ian wants to come in.
Well, only to add, thank you. I warm to your suggestions, by the way. Let's start with that. I think the idea of picking up particularly the NHS GPs. I hope you're aware that public health is now within Cambridgeshire County Council. And therefore there is a group, we have a director of public health who is jointly with Peterborough, and I wouldn't be surprised if it might be worth it if you could put down some greater thoughts, okay, and maybe communicate that to the director of public health, who is Dr. Liz Roden, and if you could perhaps put that down, that might help. In answer to question 2, really. Okay. Please put me in on that, because obviously, okay.
Just a small point. I think that Addenbrooke's recognise that they've got to reverse the centralisation. So yes, they want to have the critical facilities there for children, for Papworth, but I think they're for turning and for actually distributing a lot of the sort of fairly routine tests and some of that equipment. So I think we will see that, and that would definitely potentially link up with some of these locations. So I think you're right to focus on, a bit like with waste, reduce, reuse, rather than just go into changing. So if we can do some of this, we will. And clearly, encourage employers to follow this pattern as well, assisted by the connectivity that the county and the combined authority are investing in, because if we're going to invest, as we plan to, over £10 million into full fibre and connectivity in terms of 5G, then that will make a big difference.
Great, thank you. So, no, I'm going to be ruthless, I'm afraid. So if we move on to the agenda item number 10, page 67. Neve.
Hello. So I think most people will be familiar with the format, which the chair might want to run through. Before he does, it might be just worth mentioning something which you probably won't have seen before, which is a bit more detail on the independent economic assessment panel, which is set out on appendix 2, page 85. So happy to take any questions on that. And the other thing is this paper asks for your agreement to the next financial year's budget, and not as the recommendation states the 2019-20 budget, but the 2018-19, which is the next financial year.
I think in terms of that gateway review on page 85, we had suggested that our gateway review was delayed by a year to coincide with the combined authority, and the answer from the government was no. We'll stick to the first 5 years, so it's the original date.
So I think they're open to continuing that conversation should we wish to continue
I'm not sure they are, actually.
I think that's
Anyway, so.
we should do.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, happy with the report.
So if we look at the recommendations with the typo on recommendation Roman 2, that it's not the year 1920 but the year 1819. Claire and Phil, if you had a vote.
Do you want any further questions on the budget from Sarah, though, on the appendix? Did you want to
I'm terribly sorry, I didn't realise it was a double act. Yes, so which page, are you starting at? Page 78, yeah, sorry.
So this is the budget setting report for next financial year, and it's got two purposes really. One, and it brings to your attention the increases in the overall scheme cost for the infrastructure budget and the operational investment budget across the whole of the schemes. And then it also identifies the detailed budget for next financial year. So it's total scheme and individuals and 1 year budgets. On the infrastructure budgets, there's increases on cross-city cycling improvements from 8 million to 8.9. The A1307 corridor I want to bring to your attention because in the report we're showing the scheme as 140 million, which is the top end of all the options. It is not the option which has been decided in any way. So it's just we had to pick a figure, so we chose the highest figure for presentational purposes. Chisholm Trail cycle links has increased from 8.4 to 9.3 million. And travel hubs has gone up from 100 to 700k, and city centre access now reflects the 1.6 million, which is the 3-year costs of the removal of the park and ride charges as GCP contribution towards that.
I was actually going to ask in 3.4 travel hubs, you referenced Salisbury and Oakington. Where are we paying for, I know they're slightly different, Foxton and Whittlesford?
I think I'll have to take that question away because I'm not sure where that's been budgeted to.
Yeah, but we are doing them.
Yeah,
Yes, we
yeah.
are. Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you, take that away, thank you.
On the operational investment budget, the main change relates to the evidence, economic assessment and modelling, where there's an increase, and there's a separate section on that in the report. And then in Appendix 1A, it then details the budgets for 2018-19, and you will then see monitoring against that in the normal progress report, which comes to every board. Finally, I just wanted to mention that there's a significant issue. There's a shortfall in funding across all these schemes, which ranges between 18 million and 111 million, depending on the A1 307 corridor options. The shortfall of this will be a first call on the next phase of the City Deal grant, and if there's any issues in the gateway review of getting all or part of that, then look for other funding streams or scale back schemes. But given so much of the expenditure is after the gateway review falls into the tail end of the profile, this mitigates the risk significantly. Thank you, Chair. That's what I was going to say.
Thank you. Do you want to talk about Appendix 3?
Ian have a question.
Can we just go to 2 points which Stephen may be able to help? Really, I'm on 5.3 about the new homes bonus. Is there any likely change on the new homes bonus? And the second one, actually, apologies, is directly to Sarah, which is about the 5.2, about Section 106 money.
On the new homes bonus, I was just going to say that these figures are, it doesn't actually say so, sorry, the wording's been slightly changed. These are the updated figures, and there's a minor change in next year's allocation, but we don't know anything more about going forward.
We don't know any more at this stage?
No.
So what we're looking at is reasonable today?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Section 106, a bit concerning about what's coming in. If I'm looking at 5.2, that really is a question really for both Stephen and yourself and mine. You may have to take it away.
I think there's quite a long narrative that underpins what's the level of confidence sitting behind Section 106 receipts over the time horizon that we're looking at, both in terms of completed schemes, but also in light of some of the lifting and pooling restrictions that are suggested in the consultation on SIL and SIT. I think it is strategic infrastructure tariffs, which are also now being piloted. So it's probably a longer response. I mean, clearly the contribution that this this type of investment makes is something that we'll have to keep under review against that backdrop.
Can I suggest maybe for next report, it may be a little bit more detail is required, please, on the future and the longer term, please. I understand what you said, Stephen, okay, it's a bit of a change and it is a longer term, and I think a little bit more would be useful on the financial side of the section 106 and delivery time and SIL and all the other things that come into space.
I think on section 106, Rachel, you've been briefed yourself, haven't you, by officers, by Chris Mallion and...
Yeah, it's an ongoing discussion. We're just working on bringing you back an updated briefing.
Yeah, thank you.
Which we can share.
Which is where I was coming from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else that we want to talk about on agenda item 10, the quality progress report?
Again, a general point, I think we're spending more because we're answering a lot of questions and therefore we're going into a lot of depth on all the things that we could have taken a surface quick view on, but we're going into depth, so fair enough.
So if I take us to page 67 of the two resolutions, Claire and Phil, if you want to vote, would you be happy with them? Thank you, the three of us. Thank you. Thank you, thanks, Sarah. Agenda item 11 is the future investment strategy. This takes us the rest of our pack, and it's really in two halves. It's page 95 to 113 is the report, and then 113 onwards is the summary of the big conversation. Rachel, are you doing?
Yes, just briefly, Chair. So it follows on from the progress report and questions asked about the Gateway Review. As we prepare for the Gateway Review, I think it's as important that, as well as considering our current performance, we're able to set out a compelling vision about what we would use our investment for if we access the additional 400 million from the government. So the work that the board has been engaged in with Assembly members is to start to indicate the priorities for that investment should it be given to you. So this report is effectively setting out the work that's been taking place within the portfolio working groups led by members of the board with Assembly members, and brings forward the sort of long list that they are proposing as being considered for investment. At the same time, we are starting to consider how we would prioritise those different investment proposals, and so some of that in early thinking is set out for you, but the work is being taken forward within the Economy and Environment working group at the same time. So this work has been very much underpinned by the big conversation, which has also been referred to during the course of this meeting. You now have a wealth of information coming forward, both qualitative and quantitative, about people's priorities, and we will obviously, use that. It has been used in the working groups, but it will continue to be used on an ongoing basis to inform your decision making. So we're really just wanting to air the themes that are coming forward from the working groups. We're wanting to recognise that we need to take into account the work of the Combined Authority in its setting out its long-term vision as well, and asking for your agreement that we now define more clearly what the criteria should be on which you make judgments about the future investment going forward.
Lewis, do you want to kick
Nothing to add.
Just one thing, I think it's on the recommendations on 95 actually, it doesn't actually give a sort of timetable. I understand what has been said in working with the Combined Authorities, which I support, but I don't get a feeling as to when something might come back to ensure that we are, as it says, working and in collaboration. So I want perhaps some indication, not necessarily change the recommendation, but something that is recorded in the minutes when something will hopefully come back at least at a point in time.
So, Chair, our intention is to come back to the July meeting of the board with that prioritisation criteria, which should have taken into account by then the CA's long-term strategy. It's not in our gift, of course, as to when they publish that, but I understand they're considering a draft prospectus currently, so hopefully we would have that soon. And another key input, which is due to be published in May, is the first draft report of the Independent Economic Commission, which we would also see as a really important consideration in our debate too. So I think we will have enough to be able to come back to you with a more concrete proposal at your July meeting.
Thank you.
Claire? Bill? Anything? I mean, I totally support this. It's sort of what we used to call tranche 2 and tranche 3, but we don't call it that. But that is what it is. It's quite right that we join, as it were, the 2 5-year periods together, making a 10-year period and really a 10+ period. But just in case people wonder what it is, that's what it is. I think what's really good about it is it's been done, and I completely have praise for you, Rachel. It's been done thoroughly. It's been done in a measured way. It's based on evidence. It's based on a big conversation. It's absolutely been done in the right way, and that's what's crucial about it. So I'm very supportive of it. Peter and Claire, if you had Phil and Claire, too many Peters. Phil and Claire, if you had a vote, what would you say?
Be very supportive.
Are you supportive?
Fine.
Great. I closed the meeting at, I think, yes, no, at 6:20.
As this is Francis's last meeting, can we just thank you for your sharing over the last year?
And thank you for being my vice chair and my chair before that. And thank you to my fellow board members.
If there's a role we can find for you, we'll certainly look it out.
Thank you. But actually, as we said in one of our letters recently, it's the officer team. It's Rachel, Chris now, Peter, me, Michelle, everybody here and in the room and beyond. It's the officer team that's really been assembled in the last 2 years. It's making it hum. So it's them who we praise.
Teamwork.
Teamwork.